Have you ever watched someone dig their own grave and willingly bury themselves? I have. When our new executive fired me on a live video call during a $400 million acquisition meeting, she thought she was an alpha predator. She made a fatal mistake. She did not know I built the security locks for the entire company. Grab a strong coffee and let me tell you how my public termination completely destroyed her career. Hello to all the wonderful listeners of Boss Revenge Stories. Thank you so much for your continuous support. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely demonetized our channel, leaving us with zero budget to keep producing the content you love. If you enjoy today's story, please consider supporting us by joining our Patreon, where you will find exclusive, longer, and more detailed true stories featuring multiple emotional voiceovers that we simply cannot make public on YouTube. You can join right now by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the Patreon link in the description or the pinned comment of this video. All right, let us dive right into today's corporate nightmare. And my name is Freya Murphy. I am 34 years old, and until very recently, I was the lead data security architect for Nebula Cloud Solutions. If you know anything about the tech sector in downtown Chicago, you know it is a high-stakes pressure cooker. The air inside our glass-walled headquarters was always thick with toxic corporate paranoia, matching the bitter cold winds whipping off Lake Michigan outside. We were not just building cloud storage, we were building Fort Knox for digital assets. For 7 long years, I worked strictly in the shadows. I did not give flashy presentations. I did not play golf with the board of directors, and I certainly did not participate in the exhausting office politics. I just sat in my temperature-controlled office, quietly holding the digital heartbeat of the entire enterprise in my hands. I was the ghost in the machine, and I liked it that way. The stakes had never been higher than they were this past October. Nebula Cloud Solutions was in the final stages of closing a massive merger. Vanguard Horizon, a colossal investment conglomerate, was preparing to acquire us in a deal worth $400 million. The atmosphere in the office was electric, but suffocating. Everyone was desperate to justify their existence before the new corporate overlords took control. Enter Valerie Sterling. Valerie was our brand new Chief Operating Officer, brought in just 3 months prior to trim the fat and make Nebula look incredibly profitable for the buyers. Valerie had a leadership style that could only be described as a guillotine wrapped in a designer suit. She loved the sound of her own voice and thrived on crushing the spirits of her subordinates to establish dominance. She was the kind of executive who would schedule meetings at 7 o'clock on a Friday evening just to see who was loyal enough to cancel their weekend plans. To Valerie, employees were not human beings. We were just cells on a spreadsheet waiting to be deleted so she could secure her multi-million-dollar performance bonus. The tension reached its absolute peak on a miserable Tuesday morning. Valerie had scheduled a mandatory company-wide virtual town hall. It was not just an internal meeting. She had invited the senior acquisition representatives from Vanguard Horizon to sit in and watch her perform. The official agenda was listed as an overview of our optimal restructuring initiative. In reality, it was Valerie staging a gladiator match where she got to play the executioner for an audience of billionaires. Over 300 faces populated the grid on my monitor. I sat quietly at my desk, sipping my lukewarm coffee, completely uninterested in the corporate buzzwords Valerie was spitting out. She was rambling endlessly about synergistic alignments, aggressive streamlining, and cutting-edge paradigm shifts. Then, the tone of her voice shifted. It dropped an octave, dripping with fake corporate sympathy that made my stomach turn. As we pivot towards a leaner, more agile future, we must make difficult choices to eliminate legacy inefficiencies, Valerie announced, her perfectly manicured fingers steeled together, her eyes staring dead into the camera lens. For example, our reliance on manual oversight for data compliance is outdated, therefore, effective immediately. We are terminating the position of lead data security architect, Freya Murphy. Your services are no longer required. Automation technology has rendered this position redundant. Human resources has already deactivated your building pass. Security will escort you from the premises in exactly 15 minutes. The digital silence that followed was deafening. You could practically hear 300 people stop breathing at the exact same moment. Nobody moved. Nobody typed in the chat box. No one fired a senior architect on a live broadcast. It was barbaric. It was a public execution designed solely to show the investors at Vanguard Horizon that Valerie was a ruthless, decisive leader who did not hesitate to cut high-salary dead weight. She was grinning slightly, practically glowing with the thrill of her own perceived power. She expected a reaction. She wanted tears, shouting, or begging. She wanted me to have a humiliating meltdown right there on the screen so she could look like the rational, composed executive handling a hysterical subordinate. I gave her absolutely nothing. I looked at the screen, finding Valerie's smug face in the sea of shocked expressions. I did not cry. I did not utter a single word in my defense. Instead, I offered her a slow, freezing cold smile, a smile of genuine pity. I calmly moved my hand to my keyboard. With one deliberate keystroke, I executed a final command protocol I had prepared for exactly this kind of betrayal. I hit the enter key, terminating my active session. I closed my laptop with a soft, final click, stood up from my ergonomic chair, and walked out of the conference room. I left my coffee mug on the desk. I did not need it anymore. Valerie thought she had just cut off my head on live television, completely unaware that she had just severed her own oxygen supply. The cardboard box was surprisingly light. After 7 years of building an impenetrable fortress of data, my physical footprint amounted to a few framed photographs, a dying succulent, and a personalized ergonomic mouse. I packed these items with the precision of a watchmaker assembling a delicate, complex mechanism. The building security guards hovered near my door, their faces tight with awkwardness, but I simply nodded at them and walked out. The elevator descent felt like sinking into the deep ocean. The polished steel doors slid shut, cutting off the fluorescent glare of the executive floor and plunging me into the quiet, rhythmic hum of the shaft. I listened to the heavy mechanical cables grinding, an industrial sound that felt like the gears of fate finally shifting into motion. I stepped out into the underground parking garage. The air was biting, carrying the harsh, unforgiving chill of a Chicago winter that had seeped through the thick concrete walls. The garage was a cavernous space of gray shadows and yellow sodium lights, echoing only with the distant drone of ventilation fans. It was a sterile, lifeless underground vault. It was the perfect environment for a massive machine to power down, but my engine was just starting to roar to life. My footsteps echoed sharply as I approached my sedan. Leaning casually against the driver's side door was a man who absolutely did not belong in the damp, freezing bowels of a corporate basement, Marcus Vance. He was the head of mergers and acquisitions for Vanguard Horizon. I recognized his sharp features and perfectly tailored charcoal overcoat from the endless profile briefings I had run on the buyer team. He had been on the virtual broadcast. He had watched the entire theatrical execution unfold. Marcus did not look like a man who had just witnessed a brilliant display of corporate leadership. He looked like an architect who had just watched someone take a sledgehammer to a vital load-bearing pillar. "Miss Murphy," he said, his voice even, cutting through the frosty air. He did not offer a handshake. Instead, he held up a sleek digital tablet. The screen was facing me, and even in the dim lighting, I could clearly see the Vanguard Horizon proprietary risk management dashboard. A specific widget in the upper corner was pulsing with an angry, aggressive red glow. "I have been doing this for 15 years, Marcus continued, his eyes locking onto mine. "I have seen executives fire people to make a point. I have seen massive ego trips that cost millions of dollars. But I have never seen my real-time compliance monitor light up like a distress beacon exactly 3 seconds after a termination announcement. Valerie Sterling thinks she just trimmed the fat. My system tells me she just cut the brake lines on a speeding freight train." I set my cardboard box on the hood of my car. The metal was freezing under my palms. I allowed myself a small, genuine smile. Marcus was exceptionally sharp. Vanguard Horizon was paying him an obscene amount of money to foresee disasters. and his instincts were absolutely flawless. "Valerie is a visionary," I replied, the sarcasm thick and icy in the cold air. "She looks at the big picture. She does not bother with the microscopic gears that keep the engine from exploding. She assumed the federal security certificates were hard-coded into the corporate servers. She assumed automation naturally handles the compliance renewals." Marcus lowered the tablet, his expression tightening into a mask of grim realization. "Are they not?" "No," I stated plainly, relishing the weight of the truth. The company never owned the underlying cryptographic keys for the federal compliance nodes. When I built the final security layer 3 years ago, the board refused to approve the budget for an enterprise-grade certificate authority. So, I used my personal architectural credentials to bypass the bottleneck. The federal security certificates are licensed through my individual encrypted signature. They are permanently bound to my biometric authentication and my personal digital key vault. The silence between us stretched out, heavy and absolute, save for the hum of the overhead lights. The vast underground space felt like a massive pressure chamber. I could practically see the complex gears turning in Marcus's head, calculating the catastrophic financial fallout, running the risk assessment algorithms in his own mind. "She just fired the only authorized key holder," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Exactly," I confirmed. "The system requires a manual cryptographic handshake every 30 days to verify compliance with strict federal data protection laws. Because my access was completely revoked and my session formally terminated by executive order, that handshake cannot happen." "When does the current certificate expire?" he asked, though I could tell he already dreaded the answer. "In exactly 72 hours, I told him calmly. "When the clock runs out, every single government contract the company holds will trigger an automatic breach of protocol. The entire infrastructure will default to a hard lockdown to prevent data spillage. They will be in total violation of federal cybersecurity laws. The $400 million acquisition you are managing will become completely illegal to finalize. It will not just be a failed merger, it will be a federal crime scene." Marcus exhaled a long breath, a thick plume of white vapor rising in the freezing garage air. He was staring at a dead deal. He was looking at a corporation that was about to crash straight into a concrete wall. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a single, thick piece of premium cardstock. It was completely blank, except for a single line of text printed in the dead center. A private, secure email address, nothing else, no name, no title, no phone number. "Valerie Sterling lit a fuse today," I said, handing the card to Marcus. He took it delicately, as if the paper itself were highly volatile. "She just does not realize she is sitting right on top of the powder keg. It was a pleasure meeting you, Marcus." I picked up my box, unlocked my car, and slid into the driver's seat. I started the engine, the low rumble vibrating through the concrete floor. As I drove toward the exit ramp, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Marcus Vance was still standing there in the dim yellow light, staring at the blank card in his hand, while the invisible clock ticking down to 0 echoed loudly in the silence of the underground vault. High up in the corner suite of the Nebula Tower, Valerie Sterling was practically bathing in her own perceived brilliance. I could easily picture the scene. She was probably pacing the length of her imported Persian rug, admiring her reflection in the massive vertical windows, calculating the exact size of her annual performance bonus. In her mind, she had just executed a flawless, aggressive management maneuver. She had publicly decapitated the highest-paid technical asset on the payroll, proving to the acquisition team that she possessed the ruthless edge of a true corporate titan. Her celebration lasted exactly 45 minutes. The illusion of control shattered when the heavy glass door of her office was violently shoved open. The lead system administrator, a man who usually moved with the slow, deliberate pace of a seasoned tech veteran, stumbled into the room sweating profusely. His face was completely drained of color. He did not bother knocking. He did not care about executive hierarchy in that moment. "We have a catastrophic cascade failure," he gasped out, clutching a diagnostic tablet that was flashing violently. Every single application programming interface gateway connecting our highest-level client data has just slammed shut. The servers are rejecting all inbound and outbound traffic. Valerie glared at him, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows pulling together in severe irritation. "What are you talking about, reboot the servers? Do your job." "You do not understand," the administrator pleaded, his voice cracking with genuine panic. "The system is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it was programmed to do. It is initiating a defensive lockdown. The authentication tokens required to keep the data pipelines open were tied directly to the lead security architect profile. When you abruptly deleted that profile, the core system registered it as a hostile internal takeover." Valerie slammed her hands onto her polished mahogany desk. "Then bypass it. Hack into the mainframe and override the security protocols. I am the Chief Operating Officer. I am giving you a direct order to break the locks." It was the demand of an arrogant amateur who thought corporate data security worked like a cheap padlock in a Hollywood movie. The engineering team had no choice but to obey the screaming executive. They scrambled back to the server room and attempted a brute force override. That was exactly what I had anticipated. The moment they tried to force their way past the primary firewall without my cryptographic key, my secondary defense mechanisms woke up. It was a digital bear trap. Every single unauthorized intrusion attempt triggered a new, heavier layer of encryption. The database did not just lock them out. It actively began encrypting the directory pathways, burying the client data deeper and deeper behind impenetrable walls of code. Within 20 minutes, the engineering team was entirely locked out of their own administrative dashboards. While the Nebula headquarters descended into absolute screaming chaos, I was sitting on a plush velvet sofa in my penthouse loft, comfortably wrapped in a cashmere blanket. The massive windows of my living room offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of Lake Michigan. The water was dark and calm, reflecting the sparkling city lights of the Chicago skyline. The only sound in my apartment was the soft, soothing melody of a vintage jazz record spinning on my turntable. I poured myself a generous glass of a red wine aged for 20 years, admiring the deep ruby color against the ambient lighting. I opened my personal laptop and logged into my private email account. As expected, my inbox was currently exploding. Valerie had completely lost her mind. She was firing off emails every 3 minutes, each one escalating in unhinged desperation and legal threats. "You are in direct violation of your corporate contract." The first email read, "I will personally see you sued for $10 million if you do not immediately surrender your administrative passwords." The fourth email screamed in all capital letters, "Answer your phone. You are destroying the company. Hand over the decryption keys right now, or I'm calling the federal authorities." Read the ninth email. I took a slow, deeply satisfying sip of my wine. The complex flavors danced on my tongue. I felt absolutely no stress, no fear, and no urgency. Valerie was trapped in a burning building of her own making, wildly swinging a fire extinguisher that was completely empty. I did not reply to a single message. Instead, I opened my email settings with a few casual clicks. I created a custom automation rule. Any incoming message from Valerie Sterling was to be immediately and silently forwarded to the specific, secure email address that Marcus Vance had provided me in the parking garage. Miles away, sitting in a luxury hotel suite, Marcus watched his secure inbox light up with the forwarded messages. With every frantic, threatening email he read, the reality of the situation solidified in his mind. He saw the undeniable proof that Valerie was completely out of control. More importantly, he realized that she was desperately trying to hide this catastrophic system failure from the board of directors. She was covering up a fatal hemorrhage to save her own skin, proving exactly how toxic and incompetent she truly was. The predator was now bleeding out in the open water, completely unaware of the sharks circling below. The discreet invitation arrived the following afternoon. The meeting took place at a highly exclusive, invite-only country club located deep in the affluent northern suburbs, miles away from the prying eyes of downtown corporate spies. I arrived precisely on time. The atmosphere inside the oak-paneled private dining room was heavy, smelling of old money, expensive cigars, and aged scotch. Marcus Vance was already seated at a long, polished mahogany table. Flanking him were two men wearing impeccably tailored navy suits. They possessed the sharp, predatory eyes of high-tier corporate litigators. Marcus stood up and offered a polite nod. "Thank you for coming all the way out here. Allow me to introduce our senior legal counsel for Vanguard Horizon." I took my seat across from them, resting my hands perfectly still on the smooth wood of the table. I did not bother with pleasantries or small talk. "You read the emails." Marcus leaned back, a faint shadow of a smirk playing on his lips. "Every single one of them. Valerie Sterling is having a spectacular meltdown. She is currently telling the Nebula Board of Directors that the system is down for a routine compliance upgrade, while simultaneously threatening to report you to the authorities in her private messages. My technical team also confirmed your warning. We are locked out, completely and totally blind. The entire infrastructure will trigger a catastrophic federal violation by tomorrow evening if we do not intervene." One of the lawyers opened a thick leather briefcase and slid a meticulously printed contract across the table toward me. "Vanguard Horizon is prepared to bypass Nebula management entirely," the lawyer stated, his voice smooth and practiced. "We want to hire you directly as an independent security consultant. Your sole objective will be to restore the network and maintain compliance until the merger is finalized. We are offering a retainer of $500,000 for 1 month of service, plus a guaranteed spot on our executive technical team post-acquisition." It was a massive sum of money, a life-changing amount for a regular corporate employee. They watched my face closely, waiting for the inevitable spark of greed to light up my eyes. They expected me to snatch the pen and sign my name before they could even change their minds. I reached out, placed my index finger on the thick paper, and slowly pushed it back across the table. "I decline," I said simply. The second lawyer frowned, clearly annoyed by my calm refusal. "You are playing a very dangerous game. You might hold the keys right now, but corporate sabotage carries heavy federal penalties. We are offering you a golden parachute. If you refuse, Vanguard Horizon will simply join Valerie Sterling in burying you under endless litigation." I let out a soft, genuine laugh. It was the laugh of someone who held a royal flush while everyone else at the table was bluffing with high cards. "You cannot sue me for corporate sabotage," I explained, maintaining absolute eye contact with Marcus. "Because I am not holding Nebula data hostage. I am simply enforcing my legal rights as a private vendor. You assume the core security algorithm belongs to Nebula Cloud Solutions. It does not." The room went completely silent. The lawyers exchanged a rapid, confused glance. Marcus leaned forward, his entire demeanor shifting from confident negotiator to intensely focused listener. "2 years ago," I continued, savoring every single syllable, "under the leadership of the previous chief executive officer, the man Valerie aggressively ousted, I developed the primary biometric authentication algorithm. The board refused to fund the project, so I funded it myself. I established an independent limited liability company. I registered the intellectual property entirely under that separate corporate entity. The former chief executive officer signed a binding, ironclad enterprise licensing agreement. My company allowed Nebula to use the algorithm for an annual fee, contingent on my continued employment as the sole administrator." I watched the color slowly drain from the faces of the two legal experts. They were beginning to understand the trap I had set years in advance. "When Valerie Sterling fired me on that live video broadcast," I said, "she did not just terminate an employee, she legally voided the enterprise licensing agreement. My limited liability company immediately and automatically revoked Nebula's access to our proprietary software. That is why the application programming interfaces locked down. That is why the client data is encrypted. It is not sabotage. It is a completely legal, automated protection of private intellectual property against unauthorized corporate use." "You are committing extortion," the first lawyer snapped, abandoning his smooth facade. "We will drag you through federal court for a decade. We will freeze your assets." I maintained my calm posture. You can try, but while we spend the next 10 years arguing in court, the federal compliance window will expire. The government will seize Nebula's servers. Vanguard Horizon will lose a $400 million investment overnight. Your shareholders will demand blood. And Valerie Sterling will testify under oath that you knew about the breach and chose to litigate instead of securing the network. Are you really willing to burn down $500 million just to win an argument with me? One of the lawyers scrambled to open his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he frantically searched the patent registry databases. A few moments later, he stopped typing. He stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open, and then slowly turned his laptop around to show Marcus. There it was, an ironclad, federally registered patent owned by an independent company, completely outside of Nebula's jurisdiction. You do not need a consultant, I told them, my voice dropping to a calm, authoritative register. You cannot pay me a salary to fix this because an employee cannot override a corporate ownership dispute. If Vanguard Horizon wants to save this acquisition and prevent a massive federal data breach, you do not hire me, you acquire my company. Marcus did not look angry. He did not look defeated. Instead, a slow, deep smile spread across his face. He was a man who appreciated the beautiful, ruthless execution of a perfect strategy, even when it cornered him. How much? Marcus asked, his voice steady. $15 million, I replied without missing a beat. Paid in full, wired directly to an offshore corporate account by tomorrow morning. Additionally, the acquisition contract must include a blanket liability waiver, completely indemnifying me and my company from any and all legal action regarding the Nebula System lockout. The lawyers started to protest again, citing the outrageous valuation, but Marcus raised a single hand, silencing them instantly. Draft the acquisition papers, Marcus ordered his legal team. Do it right now. We are not leaving this room until the ink is dry. As the lawyers frantically began rewriting the terms on their laptops, sweating under the immense pressure of the ticking clock, I raised my hand to stop them for one final addition. There is one more non-negotiable clause, I stated. I will oversee the integration and unlock the data gateways. However, Valerie Sterling is strictly prohibited from being present in any meetings, communications, or physical rooms relating to this technology transfer. If she attempts to contact me, or if she is allowed anywhere near the transition process, the deal is instantly voided, and I walk away. Marcus looked at me, a profound respect shining in his eyes. He nodded slowly. Consider her officially exiled. Valerie will not even know this meeting took place until the trap snaps shut on her ankle. The legal thrill of that moment was intoxicating. I sat back in the heavy leather chair and ordered a glass of their finest sparkling water. Every single piece of the board had moved exactly where I wanted it to go. Checkmate was imminent. The official announcement from Vanguard Horizon hit the Nebula executive board like a seismic shockwave. The $400 million acquisition was officially suspended indefinitely. Panic spread through the upper echelons of the tower like a highly contagious virus. Suddenly, the brilliant, ruthless executive was no longer the golden child. The senior partners demanded immediate answers, and Valerie Sterling was rapidly running out of lies. Her promised $5 million performance bonus was evaporating into thin air with every passing hour. I did not need to be inside the building to know exactly what Valerie looked like at that moment. The immaculate designer exterior was undoubtedly cracking under the immense pressure. Her perfectly styled hair was probably disheveled. Her confident, predatory strut had devolved into frantic, anxious pacing behind the locked, heavy mahogany doors of her office. When a corporate narcissist is brutally backed into a corner and their wealth and reputation are severely threatened, they do not self-reflect. They double down. They abandon all logic and usually resort to extreme, illegal measures to save themselves. Valerie, completely unaware of the $15 million trap I had just closed with Marcus in the suburbs, decided to play entirely outside the bounds of the law. If she could not bully me into handing over the passwords through legal threats, she would steal them. Late on a Thursday night, long after the regular staff had gone home, She smuggled a team of 4 unvetted underground data extraction specialists into the Nebula headquarters. She badged them in using her executive credentials under the highly fabricated guise of independent compliance auditors. They were not auditors. They were digital mercenaries hired to aggressively crack open the physical infrastructure I had left behind. Valerie led them straight to my former office, sitting innocuously on my old desk. Exactly where I had abandoned it next to the dying potted succulent was a high-capacity external solid-state drive. Valerie assumed it was my local administrative backup. She believed it contained the cached cryptographic keys needed to manually force the network back online without my biometric authorization. "Break it open. I do not care what it takes. Just get me the core access keys before the sun comes up," Valerie ordered her mercenaries, her voice trembling with a chaotic mixture of rage and absolute dread. That drive was the centerpiece of my master stroke. It was the ultimate digital ambush. I had deliberately left it on that desk, fully anticipating that Valerie's monumental ego and desperate greed would drive her to break into it. The device was not a backup. It was a highly sophisticated military-grade honeypot. It was a dead man's switch designed to look exactly like a vulnerable, highly valuable target. The mercenaries connected their specialized decryption laptops to the drive. They ran their brute force algorithms, expecting to face heavy resistance. Instead, the drive yielded immediately. It opened its digital doors wide, giving them the temporary illusion of total victory. But the precise moment their foreign software attempted to clone the root directory, they tripped a silent, invisible wire buried deep within the firmware. There were no flashing red lights in the office. No security sirens echoed in the empty, darkened hallways. The trap was entirely soundless, yet infinitely more destructive than a physical bomb. The moment the unauthorized cloning protocol initiated, my dead man's switch executed its single, irreversible directive. It instantly compiled a comprehensive, highly encrypted packet containing the exact time, location, and hardware network signatures of the illegal intrusion. Then, bypassing Nebula's frozen network entirely by pinging a hidden, independent cellular module I had installed inside the casing. It transmitted that data packet as an emergency cybersecurity breach report directly to the primary servers of the Federal Trade Commission in Washington. Valerie did not just attempt to hack a former employee. She actively facilitated an undocumented, malicious data breach on a corporate system holding classified federal government contracts. By 3 o'clock in the morning, Nebula Cloud Solutions was automatically placed under an active, severe federal investigation. The automated confirmation receipts from the federal government bounced back to the Nebula executive server. Valerie was staring at her monitor when the red priority alerts populated on her screen. The realization of what she had just done must have felt like a massive physical blow to the chest. The federal authorities were now officially involved. There was no spinning this narrative to the board of directors. There was no hiding an active government probe from Vanguard Horizon. She had just handed the federal authorities undeniable, time-stamped proof of internal corporate espionage. Complete, unadulterated terror consumed her. The survival instinct of a cornered animal took over, stripping away whatever microscopic shred of corporate ethics she had left. Valerie ordered her mercenaries to wipe their machines and flee the building immediately. Alone in the dark office, sweating and hyperventilating, she began a frantic, incredibly sloppy campaign to cover her tracks. She started deleting security camera footage from the server room logs. She fabricated a massive trail of backdated emails, desperately trying to construct a fake narrative that I had planted malicious software before my termination. She was manufacturing forged digital evidence to frame me for the federal breach, hoping to sacrifice me to the authorities before they could uncover her direct involvement. She was digging frantically, throwing dirt in every direction, completely oblivious to the fact that she was already standing at the bottom of a concrete grave that was 50 feet deep. She thought she was building a bulletproof legal defense. She was actually just gift-wrapping the final, damning pieces of evidence I needed for her absolute, public destruction. The emergency meeting was convened at 8 o'clock on Friday morning in the Grand Penthouse boardroom. The atmosphere was incredibly grim. The members of the Nebula Board of Directors sat around the massive polished oak table, their faces pale and drawn. Valerie Sterling stood at the head of the room, looking exhausted but fiercely determined. She was projecting a massive, complex presentation onto the smart glass wall. She was passing out thick folders filled with her hastily fabricated evidence. "Gentlemen," Valerie announced, her voice dripping with artificial sorrow, "we are the victims of a coordinated, malicious cyber attack. The system lockout and the subsequent Federal Trade Commission investigation are not due to a technical failure. They are the direct result of corporate sabotage. Our former lead data security architect, acting out of pure vindictiveness after her termination, planted a highly illegal ransomware virus in our primary servers. She is a criminal trying to extort this company, and she orchestrated the breach last night to force our hand." The board members murmured in outrage. They were completely ready to believe her, ready to hand me over to the federal authorities to save their $400 million deal. That was the exact moment I decided to make my entrance. The heavy double doors of the boardroom swung open with a resounding crash. Every head in the room snapped toward the entrance. I walked in, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. I was not alone. Marcus Vance strode confidently beside me, flanked by his two senior litigators from Vanguard Horizon. Valerie froze, her mouth hanging slightly open. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a ghost. "Security!" Valerie shrieked, her composed facade shattering instantly. "Guards! Remove this woman immediately! She is a hostile trespasser!" Marcus stepped forward, raising his hand in a gesture of absolute authority. "Miss Murphy is not a trespasser," Marcus stated, his voice echoing loudly in the cavernous room. "She is the newly appointed independent technology consultant for Vanguard Horizon, and as of 3 hours ago, she is the sole owner of the security infrastructure that actually runs this company. We strongly suggest everyone sit down and listen to what she has to say." I did not wait for an invitation. I walked straight to the head of the table, gently pushing Valerie aside. I connected my digital tablet directly to the central presentation console. With a single swipe of my finger, Valerie's fabricated documents vanished from the smart glass, replaced by a massive, highly detailed data log. Valerie Sterling is a very creative storyteller. I addressed the silent, stunned board members. But digital forensics do not lie. Last night, an unauthorized extraction team infiltrated this building. They attempted to clone a secure drive I left in my former office. That drive was not a backup. It was an automated defense beacon. When triggered, it instantly reported the breach to the federal government. I tapped the screen, highlighting a specific string of numbers. Valerie claimed I orchestrated this from afar. However, the system captured the exact Internet Protocol address that authorized the mercenaries' building access and monitored their progress in real time. It was not routed through a sophisticated dark web server. The signal originated from a luxury penthouse condominium in the Gold Coast district. It is the exact home address and personal network registered to Valerie Sterling. The board members turned their furious gazes toward Valerie. She was physically trembling, backing away from the table. "That is a lie," she stammered desperately. "She spoofed my network. She framed me." I smiled, cold and merciless. "I thought you might say that. Which brings me to the most interesting discovery of the night." I tapped the console again. A new window opened on the screen, displaying a massive directory of banking ledgers and encrypted communication logs. When your personal computer connected to my defense drive last night, my software initiated an automatic threat assessment scan of the hostile machine. It accidentally bypassed a hidden partition on your personal hard drive. The federal authorities already have this file. Valerie. I pointed to the glowing text on the glass wall. For the past 8 months, long before I was fired, our brilliant executive has been systematically downloading highly classified client lists and proprietary algorithms. She has been quietly selling them to our largest competitor in Europe. The offshore wire transfers match the data delivery dates perfectly. You were not trimming the fat to help this merger. You were bleeding Nebula dry and preparing to jump ship when the hollowed-out shell finally collapsed. Absolute chaos erupted in the boardroom. The chairman of the board was shouting for the corporate lawyers. Valerie collapsed into a nearby chair, burying her face in her hands. She had nothing left to say. There were no more lies to spin. Her grand strategy was completely obliterated. Within 10 minutes, the local authorities and the building security team entered the boardroom. They did not gently escort her out. They physically removed her from the premises. I watched her go, listening to the satisfying sound of her desperate sobbing fading down the hallway. She was facing multiple federal indictments, years in a federal penitentiary, and civil lawsuits that would bankrupt her 10 times over. When the doors finally closed, the room fell into a heavy, exhausted silence. The chairman looked at me, completely defeated. "Can you fix the servers?" he asked quietly. I sat down in the luxurious leather chair Valerie had just vacated. I opened my laptop. I typed a single, 32-character password. I hit the enter key. It took exactly 3 seconds. The massive screens in the room flashed from critical red to operational green. The application programming interfaces instantly unlocked. The client data began flowing perfectly. The Vanguard Horizon acquisition was officially saved, and my $15 million buyout was fully executed. 6 months later, the freezing winds of Chicago are just a distant memory. I am currently sitting on the terrace of a breathtaking private villa perched high on the cliffs of the Amalfi Coast in Italy. The Mediterranean Sea stretches out before me, shimmering like a blanket of crushed diamonds under the warm afternoon sun. I have a chilled glass of vintage champagne in my hand, and absolutely nowhere to be. Valerie is currently awaiting trial, her assets completely frozen by the federal government. As for me, I finally have the time and the resources to build whatever I want, completely on my own terms. I raise my glass to the horizon, offering a silent, deeply sincere toast to Valerie Sterling. Her decision to publicly humiliate and fire me was truly the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. It was the catalyst for my absolute freedom. To all the wonderful listeners who stayed until the very end, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for tuning into this journey. Where in the world are you listening from today? Please let me know in the comments below. If you found today's story entertaining and want to help keep this channel alive, please consider supporting us by joining the Boss Revenge Stories Patreon. You will get immediate access to the absolute best, most intense, and completely exclusive true stories that we simply cannot publicize on YouTube. You can scan the Patreon QR code currently on your screen, or simply click the link provided in the video description or the pinned comment. Thank you again, and I will see you in the next story.